हेलो दोस्तों, दिस इज भारत कुमार एंड यू आर वाचिंग माय चैनल निर्मल इन्फो अपडेट्स।
Hold me close till I get up. Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left.
The hostile neighbors have already fought 3 full-fledged wars in 1948, 1965, and 1971, as well as the 3-week-long Kargil skirmish in 1999. And relations plunged to a new low last summer when Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi scrapped the long-standing special status of the disputed Jammu and Kashmir border region after combat between the two air forces in February 2019. Now Sam Barakman, a former chairman of Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission (PEC), has sought to ease mounting international concern that the two sides were moving towards nuclear conflict. He said, "I won't say a zero chance, but there are very dim chances of a war between the two neighbors involving nuclear arsenal despite escalating tensions." Dr. Breckman led a team of the scientists that carried out 6 successful nuclear tests in remote Kagi district of southwestern Balochistan province 22 years ago. Islamabad ordered the trials 2 weeks after New Delhi conducted 5 nuclear tests between May 11 and May 13, 1998 in Pakran range of Balochistan state, which borders Pakistan's southern Sindh province. The tit-for-tat testing triggered a new arms race in the already tense region. Dr. Barakman said, Pakistan had no other choice but to pay India back in the same coin after its nuclear tests to maintain strategic balance in the region. Indian and Pakistani border forces have been engaged in almost daily clashes at the Line of Control (LOC), a de facto border that splits the scenic Kashmir Valley between the two rivals since last summer. At the same time, both sides have been locked in a string of sea and land disputes and have carried out several saber-rattling missile tests. Dr. Barakman, who served at PEC from 1962 to 2007 and played a key role in developing his country's nuclear program, said, "The leadership of both countries are fully aware of the catastrophe a nuclear war can cause. They won't go for that option no matter how tense the situation is." He said he expected both sides to continue provoking each other but doubted they would cross the limit and pursue a nuclear option. He said, "Both countries have long been reeling from poverty, illiteracy, and other health and economic issues. Wars are under competition and the arms race are not in the interest of the two nations." One of the important policy reforms announcements done by the government in defense manufacturing in India last week was allowing foreign original equipment manufacturers (OEMs) to invest up to 74% foreign direct investment (FDI) in defense ventures in India. In the medium to long run, this could be a welcome measure, but in the meantime, the proposals pending with the Defense Acquisition Council (DAC) will have to be quickly cleared since there are critical gaps that Indian armed forces are faced with. One ready example is the long-drawn-out saga of procuring utility helicopters for the Indian Navy. First proposed in 2008, the case for replacement of jetted helicopters was projected under the global category of procurement. For 6 years, nothing happened. In 2014, the DAP directed the Indian Navy to withdraw the case and initiate a new proposal under Buy and Make Indian. The next year, in 2015, the DAP again directed Navy to combine the requirement with the overall consolidated helicopter acquisition strategy. Later, the DAP decided to progress the case under the Strategic Partnership (SP) model. The acceptance of necessity (AON), the first step in the long road towards procuring a platform, was accorded in August 2018, 3 years after it was decided to go the Strategic Partnership (SP) model way. In July 2015, the Devendra Singh Committee on Make in India moved the idea of SP model for creating capacity in the private sector as an alternate to DPSUS/SUS in strategic sectors of defense manufacturing. Later, DR Task Force recommended the model to be followed, which did away with the bidding system. However, this was retained and Chapter 7 on SP model was included in the DPP. The then Minister of State for Defense, Dr. Subhash Bhamari, in a reply to Rajya Sabha stated, SP model would provide a transparent, objective and functional mechanism to encourage broader participation of private sector in addition to DPSUS/F. It will provide greater self-reliance in meeting national security objectives. This is also included in the preamble of Chapter 7. It reads, in parts, Definition of SP Model Vipera 3. Such a partnership between the MOD and the Indian private entity will be known as strategic partnership. Overall aim will be to build indigenous capability in the private sector to design, develop and manufacture complex weapon systems. Private companies have pointed to the lack of a level playing field as compared to DPS-US/OFS. As with liberalization of economy in 1990s, involvement of private sector in defense manufacturing will have a transformational impact. While Para 9 of Chapter 7 states that MOD may consider the role of DPS-US/OFS at the appropriate stage keeping in view the order book position, capacity and price competitiveness, Para 18 of amplifying instructions issued to Chapter 7 at a later date clarify at the Accord of AON, DAC shall consider the participation of DPS-US/CIS in the specific proposal keeping in view the order book position, capacity and price competitiveness. So in keeping with the above, the DAP before giving approval to AON for the naval utility helicopters had indeed discussed the participation of Hindustan Aeronautics Ltd, HAL, a DPSU. That time, according to all available figures, the HAL's order book was overflowing even when it did not have the commensurate capacity. Total orders equals 353 helicopters and 83 LCAs, 226 T, 200 LUH. 15 ALH, 77 ALH, WSI, 18 Chittock/Cheetah, -43. The Navy had pointed out over the years that despite knowing its requirements, HAL had not been able to provide it with a shipborne helicopter since 2003 when the first Advanced Light Helicopter, ALH, was delivered to the Navy. And yet, HAL, using various means, has managed to insert itself as a competitor for the NUH, which has now become a critical necessity for the Navy, further delaying the project, defense sources point out. Apart from a poor track record in meeting deadlines, HAL does not meet cost competitiveness in the NUH proposal either. According to one calculation, the cost of an advanced fully equipped helicopters in ALH class is between 13 to 18 million US dollars, whereas the cost of the ALH is estimated to be around 16 million US dollars. Moreover, the ALH is not yet a fully proven seaworthy platform. Sources point out that the Indian Navy has lost 5 Chittock helicopters in the last 7 years. The number of Chittock helicopters available with the Navy will reduce considerably by 2023 to 2025 and the Navy will be faced with a major capability gap. Inclusion of HAL will result in setting back the procedure by at least another 2 years. The capability gap, therefore, will be a critical vulnerability of ships at sea. For this reason alone, HAL should be kept out of the competition in this particular proposal, those who have been watching the never-ending saga of NUH procurement point out. Naval aviators have also listed out several other reasons why the ALH proposed by HAL for the NUH competition is not suitable. For one, the ALH does not meet the qualitative requirements of the Indian Navy. The helicopters being operated by the Navy presently and the 16 new ALH Mk-III on order are to be operated only from the shore as they are not capable of being operated from ships. Secondly, HAL has been indicating that it is working on the blade folding capability on ALH, a must for parking and storage on ships. However, the segmented blade folding as a concept has been rarely utilized across the world's navies since it is not found to be practical. The Indian Navy is therefore in a fix. It fears that the inclusion of ALH Mk-III as a platform for NUH with HAL as a strategic partner will result in either or all of the following: force the Indian Navy to accept a platform with reduced capabilities compromising its operational requirements, necessitate modifications to an SQRS of NUH delaying the entire project further and time overruns resulting in further delay in inducting this capability into the Navy. None of the 3 scenarios is very palatable for a Navy that is a premier security provider in the Indian Ocean and is facing increasing competition from the resurging Chinese Navy. Hopefully, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and other members of the DAC will be sagacious enough not to force HAL's entry into a critical project. Tension is gradually building up between Indian and Chinese armies in several areas in Ladakh and northern Sikkim along the undemarcated Sino-India border, with both sides bringing in additional troops, days after they were involved in 2 violent face-offs, authoritative sources said on Tuesday. Both the Indian and Chinese armies have brought in more troops in sensitive locations like Demchok, Dorlad-Bedgoldi and areas around Galwan River as well as Pangong Tso Lake and Lodik, the sources said. Read more from TOI plus double stigma of being a convict and likely COVID carrier leaves some released inmates homeless and hounded desperate migrant families from across the country are pawning jewelry, selling belongings to pay for their ride back home. The area around Galwan has been a point of friction between the two sides for over 6 decades. They had a showdown over it in 1962 as well. The sources said both the sides have deployed their troops around Galwan River and Pangong Tso Lake, the two areas where they used to carry out border patrol. It is learned that Chinese side has erected a sizable number of tents in the Galwan Valley area, following which India is keeping a hawk-eye vigil there. On May 5, around 250 Indian and Chinese army personnel clashed with iron rods, sticks, and even resorted to stone pelting in the Pangong Tso Lake area, in which soldiers on both sides sustained injuries. In a separate incident, nearly 150 Indian and Chinese military personnel were engaged in a face-off near Neklod Pass in the Sikkim sector on May 9. At least 10 soldiers from both sides sustained injuries in the incident, according to the sources. Neither the Army nor the Ministry of External Affairs commented on the escalating tension between the two armies. In its reaction to the two face-offs, the Ministry of External Affairs last week said it remained committed to maintaining peace and tranquility along the border with China, noting that such incidents could have been avoided if there was a common perception about the frontier. It is learned that additional troops have also been rushed to several areas in northern Sikkim as part of their aggressive posturing in guarding the disputed border. A report by China's official media on Monday said Chinese troops have bolstered their border control measures in the Galwan Valley and the Aksa-Ichin region. The Chinese action followed India's recent illegal construction of defense facilities across the border into Chinese territory in the Galwan Valley region, a write-up in the state-run Global Times tabloid said, quoting unnamed military sources. The aggressive posturing by the two sides came amid India's escalating border war with Nepal over construction of a strategically key road linking Lapulak Pass with Darkula in Uttarakhand. Army Chief Gen M. Naravan last week said Nepal objected to the newly inaugurated road at the behest of someone else, in an apparent reference to a possible instigation by China on the matter. Nepal rejected the comments. The Lapulak Pass is a far western point near Kalapani, a disputed border area between Nepal and India. Both India and Nepal claim Kalapani as an integral part of their territory. It was not clear whether Gen Naravan will visit Nepal soon, following a tradition of the new Indian Army chief visiting Nepal after taking charge. His predecessor Gen Bipin Rawat visited Nepal less than 3 months after taking charge, during which he was conferred the title of Honorary General of the Nepalese Army. China on Tuesday said the Kalapani issue is between India and Nepal and hoped that the two neighbors would refrain from unilateral actions and properly resolve their disputes through friendly consultations. The 80 km long strategically crucial road at a height of 17,000 kilometers along the border with China in Uttarakhand was thrown open by Defense Minister Rajnath Singh on May 8. The troops of India and China were engaged in a 73-day standoff in Deklam Tri-Junction in 2017, which even triggered fears of a war between the two nuclear-armed neighbors. The India-China border dispute covers the 3,488 km long line of actual control, de facto border between the two countries. China claims Arunachal Pradesh as part of southern Tibet while India contests it. Both sides have been asserting that pending a final resolution of the boundary issue, it is necessary to maintain peace and tranquility in the border areas. China has been critical of India's reorganization of J&K, and has particularly criticized New Delhi for making Ladakh a union territory. China lays claim over several parts of Ladakh. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping held their first informal summit in April 2018 in the Chinese city of Wuhan, months after the Deklam standoff. In the summit, the two leaders decided to issue strategic guidance to their militaries to strengthen communication so that they can build trust and understanding. Modi and Xi held their second informal summit in Manila near China in October last year, with a focus on further broadening bilateral ties. India has an over 15,000 kilometers long land border with her neighbors, running along some of the harshest terrains in the world. The proposed 3-year tour of duty will benefit everyone, but the Army security a long and sustained period of training for truncated service in the uniform will not be cost-effective and will make the Army a supplier of recruits for the private sector. May 19, 2020 Rajkot Indian Army recruits wearing their ceremonial uniform perform a salute during their passing out parade at a garrison in Rangreth on the outskirts of Srinagar. India has an over 15,000 kilometers long land border with her neighbors running along some of the harshest terrains in the world. Relations with 2 of her 6 neighboring countries, China and Pakistan, have been strained for a long time. The border that India shares with them is disputed and undemarcated. Over 1.2 million personnel of the Indian Army have their hands full guarding the 2 fronts on a round-the-year basis. To add to their woes, there has been a considerable deficiency in their officer ranks, which stands at nearly 24% as on date. The Short Service (SS) Commission scheme was introduced to fill up the lower ranks. SS officers serve a 10-year term extendable to 14 years and thereafter are discharged from service. However, the scheme has not helped in reducing the shortage in any significant way. A new scheme, reportedly on the government's drawing board, is to introduce a short 3-year term called Tour of Duty (TOD). The plan envisages inducting 100 officers and 1,000 other ranks for a 3-year term. With such small numbers, it is unlikely to address the problem of deficiency. What could be the other purpose of introducing such a scheme? As per media reports, the government aims to meet the nationalistic aspirations of today's youth by allowing them to don a military uniform for short periods. The photos in their CVS will not only be an inspiration to them but will also motivate others to follow in their footsteps. This will project the government as one that is welfare-oriented and will buttress its patriotic and nationalistic credentials. The youth, having imbibed a military discipline and regulated work culture, will have improved job prospects and will gain the upper hand when it comes to selections in the private sector. The scheme thus is to serve many purposes. The downside of the proposal, by way of its negative impact on the Army, seems either to have escaped the notice of the planners or has been glossed over. The pre-commission training of officers is long and sustained in different academies. For TEDs, in view of their truncated service in the uniform, a long period of training will obviously not be cost-effective. Their training, therefore, is unlikely to exceed 6 months or so. Besides, the post-commission grounding that an officer goes through includes young officers' courses lasting several months. The duration depends on different arms and services. This training is unlikely to be extended to the short exposure TEDs unless it is to be assumed that the Army will be in their training ground for future citizens and entrepreneurs. Contours have yet to be made clear. The TEDs are thus likely to end up, at best, as semi-trained leaders. The acid test of an army is during a war. A soldier blindly follows the orders of his officer. He is even prepared to lay down his life on the orders of his superior. He does so only when convinced that the officer is better than him in every which way. That confidence may not be generated by officers who would lack required on-the-job skills. On their part, most dots are likely to consider themselves in transit and may remain more preoccupied and focused on their post-uniform employment prospects. The Army will end up taking a hit and have its professional capabilities eroded. If the TOD scheme, as published in the media, is adopted, it will be a serious impediment for the Army. The Army uniform will end up being used as a mere billboard for a display of patriotic zeal and a tool to burnish CVS by individuals. The Army will also willy-nilly become a supplier of recruits for the private sector. Sometimes the best plans can fail to achieve the intended results if implemented without due consideration. New schemes are easiest to introduce in the Army. While they may express their reservations internally, their apprehensions do not get disclosed publicly. In the public's perception, their concurrence and willingness are assumed as a given. Introducing a new scheme in the form of TOD is avoidable. Instead, the current SS scheme can be reviewed and modified. The existing 10 to 14 years results in an officer shedding his uniform when he is in his mid or late 30s. That makes his lateral switch to a private sector job difficult. The period of his engagement can be reduced to a fixed 5-year term. All the above stated aims can then be achieved and the Army too will have the officer available long enough to make a meaningful contribution. Anything less than 5 years may serve individual purposes but will not benefit the institution of the Army. There is a need for a detailed examination of the proposal before the final green signal is given. For perceived gains that are at best debatable, even if not questionable, we should not be putting the Army's operational efficiency under stress.
You